Hi, good afternoon. This is the Coastal Conservancy's Prop 1 webinar. I think it's 2 o'clock exactly, so we'll wait just a minute to let a few more people join, and then we'll go through the presentation. So just hang tight for a sec. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mary Small. I am the Deputy Director at the Coastal Conservancy, and I am joined here virtually with Trish Chapman, who's our Central Coast Manager, and Megan Cooper, who is our South Coast Manager. And this is our Prop 1 webinar for the current Prop 1 grant round, which covers the Central and South Coast. We're recording this webinar just so you know that, and we'll post it on our website afterwards. And I'm going to go through a dozen or so slides that are just kind of an overview of Prop 1, some of the frequently asked questions we get about these grant rounds. And then at the end, there'll be a lot of time for you to ask questions. And the best way for you to ask questions is in the question box, which you should see in the GoToWebinar little box on the side of the screen. And if you type your questions in there, I will just read them, and Megan, Trish, and I will answer them to the best of our ability. So thanks for taking the time this afternoon. I hope you're all safe and adjusting to this new world. This is, as I said, the Coastal Conservancy's Prop 1 webinar. Just by stepping back, the Coastal Conservancy, our mission is to act with others to preserve and protect and restore the resources of the California coast, ocean, and San Francisco Bay Area. Oh, that doesn't work. We are different from most state agencies in that we have a very broad mandate, but a more specific jurisdiction. So we work basically in the coastal watersheds, but we work on a variety of different kinds of projects. And especially we work on multi-benefit projects. So we do everything from habitat restoration to public access, all kinds of projects. This map shows the Central and South Coast jurisdiction. So it's basically from San Mateo down to the Mexican border. And then we divide the region between Santa Barbara and Ventura County. So Central Coast is Santa Barbara North, and then Ventura to San Diego is the South Coast. And we're looking for projects in those counties. And the approximate funding we have available this round is $3 million for the Central Coast and $2 million for the South Coast. The funding for this grant round comes out of Proposition 1. This was passed several years ago, and it's really focused on water quality, water sustainability, and watersheds, protecting lakes and coastal streams. That's the chapter in which the Coastal Conservancy has funding. And we offer this slide, first of all, so Prop 1 was a $7.1 billion bond. And then even within Chapter 6, there is quite a bit of funding divided into several different agencies. So within that, the Coastal Conservancy was allocated $100.5 million, and these grants would come out of that piece. When Prop 1 passed, the Coastal Conservancy updated its strategic plan and identified what would be the priority kinds of projects that we would fund with Prop 1. And there are 4 priorities that came out of that. The first is water sustainability. These are sort of multi-benefit projects that either protect watersheds or water supply or in-stream flow or conserve water with a natural habitat component. That's sort of the broadest category, I think, in a way. The second is urban greening projects. The third is wetland restoration projects. And then the fourth are projects that restore or enhance habitat for anadromous fish. The Prop 1 itself has a number of requirements that were kind of written into the bond. All of the grants have to be awarded through competitive processes, and the agencies had to develop solicitation and evaluation guidelines. And then there's several prioritization criteria that were written into the bond. So after Prop 1 passed, the Conservancy went through a process to develop our guidelines. And this is kind of an overview of some of the things that are in there. In order for a project to be eligible for Prop 1 funding, first of all, it has to be consistent with the purposes of Prop 1, and specifically that protecting lakes, watersheds, Chapter 6, which is where our funding comes from. And then the second kind of filter is the Coastal Conservancy's project selection criteria, which are a little bit broader, but are included in the application. And then Prop 1 requires that projects promote and implement state plans and policies. So in our application, we've kind of identified some of those plans and policies and given you an opportunity to help us understand how your project might fit within those. There has to be an eligible grantee, and the way Prop 1 is written, federal agencies are not eligible, but other than that, it's other government agencies, nonprofits, tribes are all eligible. And then finally, the project, because it's a bond, the project has to be eligible for bond funding, which typically means that it's a capital investment, that the state will be paying for this money for 30 years. So it's supposed to go towards improvements that have a longer term life, like this fish passage project shown in the middle, rather than like operation and maintenance of an existing facility. That's typically not eligible, or research are really not eligible for bond funding. So in terms of the grant scoring and evaluation criteria, the priorities that come from Prop 1 and that are in our guidelines, again, is that it advances the purposes of Prop 1, that it leverages funding, and for us, our board made it really clear that they count matching funds as non-state matching funds. So this is a little different from some other agencies. So we really need to understand, of your matching funds, how much is coming from other state government agencies and how much is coming from other sources. And we include in those other sources, we'll count inclined match, and you're welcome to include match that, like if you've applied for a federal grant but you haven't heard yet, you can include that. Just let us know sort of what the status is. Priorities for projects that produce the greatest public benefit, that use the best available science to inform their decisions, that use new or innovative technologies or practices, and projects that benefit disadvantaged communities. So those are all things to sort of think about as you're putting together your application. Here are some sort of general application tips. First of all, we welcome pre-proposal consultation, and I'll get to more details on that in a minute. Once you've submitted the proposal, then we can't really talk to you about it until we go through the whole scoring process. I would say to just look at the scoring criteria. They're included in our application, and just pay attention to them because that's what we have to use as we're looking at your application. On the cover sheet, we ask you for the latitude and longitude of your project and whether or not it benefits a disadvantaged community. The easiest way to get the lat longs is just to open Google Maps and right-click on your project location, and you can just copy that format exactly into our little table, and that's what we're looking for. And then the disadvantaged community maps, there's a link within the application to online maps. So you can see if your project is adjacent to, you know, if it's in a disadvantaged community, you get a certain number of points. But if you can make a really credible explanation for how it benefits maybe an adjacent disadvantaged community, that is also, there's also points for that. So just pay attention to that. With matching funds, as I said, we really are looking for non-state match, but we include in-kind match. And there's a place for you to tell us if you're applying to other state grant programs, just so we can be sure we're coordinated. And then last tip, I guess, is that we do fund planning projects. And the thing I think about making a successful application for a planning project is that we need to understand that there is a plan for how you're going to implement the project. So we'll pay for, you know, for some form of the plan, but we want to know kind of what your strategy is going to be to actually implement the project. Our board doesn't want to see plans that just sit on shelves. So here's your grant application checklist. There's the grant application form, which is in Microsoft Word. Then maps or design plans or photos. And if you can put those all in like one PDF file, that's helpful to us. For restoration and ecosystem protection projects, you need to submit a Conservation Corps consultation document, and there's a link in the grant application. It's a 2-page form that you need to fill out and send to the Conservation Corps and give them time to review it, and then they'll send it back to you. You know, if the Corps can do the work, they need to be included in your application. So that's what this consultation is for. And that's just written into Prop 1. And then finally, for nonprofit organizations, we have a nonprofit pre-award questionnaire. If you've applied to us in the last couple of years and you have submitted this questionnaire to us, you can just tell us when you last sent it to us. But if you haven't, then please fill that out. And it's really, this is more of a tool we've been trying to develop to make sure that nonprofits are set up to receive state grants, because we had some, especially small organizations, that didn't have the fiscal controls they needed. So this isn't a yes/no thing, but it may be something where we flag things that we think we might need to help you with, just to be sure you're able to successfully manage a state grant and not have audit findings at the end, because like all state grants, these will be audited. I mean, not everyone will be audited, but you should expect to be audited. So as I said, you're welcome to consult with the Conservancy before you apply. The best way to do that is to just email a really short description of your project and send it to Megan, whose email is here, if it's in the South Coast, or Trish, if it's in the Central Coast. Before I get to your questions, I will go through some of the questions that we often get on these webinars and in regards to these grants. The first is there a maximum or minimum award? No, but we have about $5 million that we're gonna be granting out. So I guess in a way there is a maximum. Will the Conservancy have other Prop 1 rounds this year? The answer is no. Will we fund planning? Yes. And I think I already kind of covered this, but we want to see that the planning will lead towards project implementation. And definitely, and we can't, because it's bond funds, we can't fund plans that don't lead to projects and aren't a phase of project development, like some kind of regional plan. It needs to be a component of implementing a project. Can applicants apply for multi-phase projects? The answer is yes, but your application should be for that specific phase. You're welcome to describe the entire project, but as we're evaluating it, it's really helpful if we can understand what it is you want us to fund. So just, you know, if you put that question to mind, because that's what we're going to be trying to evaluate. Can you be reimbursed for costs prior to the grant award? The answer is no. How much funding do we have left? As I said, about $3 million for the Central Coast and $2 million for the South Coast. Will we fund land acquisitions? Yes. Are we coordinating with Fish and Wildlife and OPC and the other agencies administering related grants? The answer is yes. But just the way Prop 1 is written, we all sort of have to run our own grant rounds separately. The Conservancy typically funds projects that include public access. Are these kinds of projects eligible for Prop 1? The answer to this is sort of maybe, because Prop 1 was really focused on water quality supply and watersheds. That needs to be like the main purpose of the project. But if your project delivers multiple benefits, like includes some kind of other benefits, that's a good thing and we'll give it extra points, but there has to be kind of a core Prop 1 purpose in order to use this funding. Do we need to complete CEQA or have permits in order to apply? The answer is no. If you're applying for implementation funds, implementing a project, you'll need CEQA before the Conservancy can award a grant. When our board takes action, it has to make CEQA findings. So that CEQA review would have to be complete. But we could certainly review the application before you're all the way through that process. So that's my pre-prepared script. If you have any questions, please type them into the question box. And I'm not seeing any yet. So I will give it a minute. Okay, now I have to make the box bigger so I can read it. Oh, and I was gonna turn on my camera so you could see me while I'm answering questions. So what will the average award be in Southern California in the South region? We really don't know. We don't have a, oh, there's Trish. Hey, Trish. We don't have an average within Prop 1. We have awarded some very large grants and some very small ones. So it really just depends on the projects that come in. Are there any other questions? Can a project apply for design and implementation funding? Trish, you want to take that, or Megan?
Yeah, no, because you can't, if you haven't done the plan yet, you're not ready to do CEQA, and we won't award implementation funding until you've done CEQA. So you really need to apply twice for us, first for planning money and then for implementation. If you have done like enough of the planning, say up to 50% designs or something, and you could do CEQA, you could apply to us for the remaining design work and implementation.
Great. Does the governor's budget revisions affect the grant awards? No. These funds aren't affected by the governor's budget, thankfully. The next question is, if a project was submitted to CDFW but not awarded, does this affect eligibility? No, not really. I mean, you might see if they'll give you feedback so you could write a better application, but I don't think it wouldn't necessarily affect it. Deborah Hurst, hi Deborah, says, are 3-year grant periods okay? Use the funds by when? Yes. I mean, so applications are due in the end of July, and we probably won't be able to award funds until early next year. We have a couple of different appropriations of Prop 1. Typically, when we get the money, we have 5 years to spend it. There's a couple of different appropriations, so we'll have to sort of work it out depending on how much time you need for your project and when you're ready to start. But 3 years shouldn't be a problem.
So
So
I think
Shirley,
this
yeah,
the CDFW question was kind of divided and asking whether they could work out the low point areas with us to give them a better chance of the project being competitive. And yeah, the answer to that is yes. It does, like Mary said, it would be good for you to ask CDFW what they thought the weaknesses were, but in your consultation with us, we could discuss those.
Janice said start and end of cycle. I'm not sure I totally understand. Applications are due the 31st of July, is that right, Trish? I don't know if
Yes.
you don't have. Yeah. And then we'll take a few months to do the reviews and get back to folks. And then the way the Conservancy process works, our board has to authorize a project. So we'll review all the applications. We'll send recommendations. These are the ones we're going to recommend to our board. But then the grant isn't actually awarded until our board can act on it. And we think for these, the earliest would be early in 2021 that we'd be able to take them to the board. So that's sort of the cycle. If that wasn't your question, Janice, feel free to jump in. Okay, you want to take Corey's? Trish, can you see this? Completed a feasibility study, now seeking funding for permitting and design of a large project. Would this be eligible?
Yes, yeah, that'd be eligible.
Okay, could you elaborate on the requirements that projects must provide benefits or improvements that are greater than required applicable environmental mitigation measures or compliance obligations? I have a project that would meet compliance obligations and provide net environmental benefits. Does you want to take that one or you want me to try?
I think that's, oh, I was just going to jump
Megan,
in.
jump in.
Hi. I know I'm here, even though you can't see me. So this is related to whether or not we can use bond funding to fund mitigation requirements, which is not something that we can fund with bond money because it is, as it says, to be used for net environmental benefit. So if you have a mitigation requirement from a fine or a permit, you have to pay with that requirement separately. Now, we have in the past been able to use bond money to add on to a mitigation project and make it a bigger project, but you have to be very careful that you're tracking your mitigation requirements separately from the money that the bond money that's being used for the restoration project. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thanks, Megan. So are you prioritizing shovel-ready projects over planning projects? One of you guys want to take that?
I'll say in the Central Coast, no. However, just based on the scoring, it's planning projects have a little bit harder time getting a competitive score. And as Mary was saying, the thing that really can impact that is how much information you give us about about your plan for getting the project implemented. And that if the more convinced we are that the plan will lead to an in-the-ground project, the better the planning project will score. Megan, how about for the South Coast?
No, I agree. That's great. Thanks.
Okay, I mentioned access is an added value. What other additional benefits would you value, such as greenhouse gas capture, or if a project is piloting an innovation that could have wider application in the region? Megan, Trish, you want to take that? I mean, I would say both of those would be good.
Yeah, both of those are good examples. Go ahead, Megan.
I think in general, yeah, I was just going to say, so Prop 1 was really set up to fund multi-benefit projects. So in any case where a project can meet more than one of the priorities of Proposition 1, that's going to help your project to score better, as long as it's a real part of the project and not something that's sort of been added on. But I think that if you have a project that is wetlands restoration, that's capturing greenhouse gases, that's providing public access, that's also providing water quality and water supply benefits, all of those things are going to help your project score better in terms of Prop 1 funding.
Okay, that is the last question I see in the question box. Does anyone have, give you a minute in case there are more questions. Going once. Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time. I hope it was helpful. And we will, as I said, we'll post this. And I think the emails, your guys' emails are in the
Yeah.
solicitation
are.
package that's on the website as well. That's probably the main follow-up thing. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Bye.
Thanks, Mary.